Hey everyone, and welcome to the 2026 version of the National Invasive Species Awareness Week, or what a lot of folks know as NISAW. My name is Rick O'Connor. I'm the Florida Sea Grant Extension Agent in Escambia County in the far western end of the Florida Panhandle. And the Panhandle Extension Agents over the last couple of years have been doing a variety of different education programs and projects to educate the public about some of these invasive species threats. So for this year, for NISAW, as a lot of folks like to call this particular time of year, we are going to be looking at several different coastal species. And we're going to start today with one that is what we call an EDRR species. That means it's relatively new in the area. This is the Cuban tree frog. And this is the frog itself. This is a preserved one that we captured in South Florida. But it is from Cuba. That's the first thing. It is the Cuban tree frog. And so one of the first characteristics of an invasive species is that it's not native to the area. So though it does have Cuban in its name, it is from Cuba, you can't find it in some of the other Caribbean islands. We believe it reached Florida in the early part of the 20th century by hitchhiking on boats crossing the Florida Straits. It began to spread out throughout South Florida, and like so many other invasive species, its native predators are not around, they don't have their native diseases, and there's plenty of food source, the climate is right, and so they began to perpetuate all over the place. So they are well established in South Florida now, have been for decades. They've made it all the way up to Gainesville as established, and they're now entering the Florida Panhandle. We've been blessed in some ways to not have to worry too much about some of these tropical invasives because of our climate. But over the last couple of years, here it is today in January, and it's 70 degrees. So these animals now are beginning able to establish themselves even in the Panhandle. There's a little over just under 4,000 records of the Cuban tree frog in the Florida Panhandle now, 26 in Escambia County that I know of. And so we're trying to educate folks about the animal, the problems that it causes, and how to manage it. So how do you know if it's a Cuban tree frog if you see it? Again, this is a preserved one, so it's hard to tell. But the first thing you'll notice is that it's got toe pads. And so these toe pads that you see on the feet, on both the front and the back feet, identified as a tree frog. Tree frogs will use these toe pads to stick to the sides of trees or the side of buildings where they feed, and they're nocturnal feeders. Often they'll come out at night, go stick on the side of a building wherever there's a light source nearby. They really like to be close to bushes because during the daytime they hide. They'll hide up in the trees, hence their name, tree frog. They'll hide in shrubs like this during the daylight hours, and at night they come back out to feed. So that's the first thing you'll notice is these big toe pads. The second thing, notice the size. Now this frog here is just a little under 4 inches. Most of our native tree frogs are about 1 to 2 inches long, about that big. But some female Cuban tree frogs can be 6 inches. They can be the size of my hand, actually. So that's one thing. If you've got a tree frog stuck on the side of your house or on a tree that's 4 to 6 inches in length, that's the one. That's it. As far as color, it's very, very difficult to go with color. They can change colors like a lot of our native tree frogs can as well, but they have been seen white, they've seen them cream color, green, gray, a dark brown. We usually do have some blotches and stripes on them, but again, there's a lot of our native frogs that have that coloration as well. This one is a preserved specimen, so it's hard to see, but right here between the forearm and the hind limb right here, they have what they call a yellow wash. Again, we have a couple of native frogs that have that as well. But that is one of the distinct characteristics. When they're young, if you've got a little tree frog, a Cuban tree frog, you'll look at it from the belly side here, you'll notice the skeleton, you can actually see the bone through the skin. The skeleton will appear blue. And the Cuban tree frog is the only one that has that. So if it's a white looking skeleton, it's a native. If you see the blue, then you're dealing with the Cuban tree frog. One last characteristic to help identify it is right here between the eyes. The skin is actually fused to the skull, and so it doesn't slide. On our native ones, it actually does slide. So if you find one of these, you obviously don't want to have to manage any of our native ones. We want to keep them around. But that is how to identify the Cuban tree frog. What kind of issues or problems is this frog causing? On the environmental scale, they are big. I mean, again, a 6-inch Cuban tree frog is kind of like the bullfrog of the tree frog world, if you will. And they can eat a variety of different things. Usually where these guys become quite abundant, all the native tree frogs will disappear. Other frogs will disappear. Their tadpoles are very aggressive in outcompeting native tadpoles. They have been known to eat actually small lizards. They will eat insects and other bugs, and even some small snakes. So the overall biodiversity in the area tends to decline when these things are around because they have few predators. This one does have a mild toxin. The Cuban tree frog does have a mild toxin. So if you're handling it, we recommend you handle it with gloves, but if you have to handle it with your bare hand, we do recommend that you wash your hands before you touch your face. Now again, this one's preserved, so it's had alcohol on it. But if I found this one, which I did in South Florida, I had to wash my hands almost right away after I handled the thing. So that is some of the environmental problems. Economically, there's not been too many problems on the economic side as far as Floridians are concerned. They are known to get into houses. They will settle out in electric panels. One of the things they tend to do, they like to hang out in the electric panels. And from there, they have been known to short circuit HVAC systems and other electric systems in the house. So that's kind of annoying and can be costly. Some of them do have impacts on stucco. They will get up in behind it to protect themselves, and so there's been some issues with that. A lot of it has to do with what we would call nuisance to humans. How that becomes a nuisance is that, again, when you've got an invasive species, it's rare to have a couple. You usually have a lot. So if you came home and there was 40 or 50 of these things stuck to the wall like this at night, that kind of creeps a lot of folks out. Another problem, they do like to go into pipes, as many of our tree frogs do. They like to go into pipes during the daytime to hide and get ready to feed the next night. And for Cuban tree frogs, they have been known to get into the vent pipes going into the sewer system, and people will open up their commode and literally see the frog sitting in the water in the commode. That has already actually happened in Pensacola. I've had one call on that. So that is something. It's more of a, that folks don't particularly care for them. The call of this animal sounds very similar to a squeaky screen door. And so when you've got 40 or 50 of them on the wall and they're all calling at night, it's kind of annoying. It keeps people up at night. So a lot of folks don't like the frog for that reason. So it is an invasive species. It's not native to the area. It is causing a problem. Unfortunately, it was introduced by humans, in this case accidentally. So how do you manage the thing? Well, the first thing is you've got to catch them. And a good way to do this was developed by Dr. Steve Johnson at the University of Florida, is you can take a piece of PVC pipe about 3 feet long and about 1.25 inches in diameter, cut it so that you can get it in the ground right here, and you want to place it close to the house, close to a bush. This is where they would typically come. And so at night they'll come out and feed on the insects, but during the daytime they'll hide in these pipes. So you just kind of wrap this thing down like so. You got another one, that one's a little bit bigger. And so you got these standpipes. You can have 2 or 3 of these things sitting out behind the bushes. And in the morning what you do is you come and you just check. Usually the tree frogs are going to be right here at the top. Again, if you see a really bright green one that's smooth, that's the other thing. The Cuban tree frogs have sort of a warty covering on their body. If the animal is smooth or got a white stripe, it's probably a native. You don't have to worry about it. Obviously, if you've got a 3 to 4 inch tree frog, that's it. You've got the Cuban tree frog. Now, if you're not 100% sure and you want a better look, remember again, they've got a toxic slime in their skin. So what you do is you put a bag over it like so, you pull the pipe up, and then you can take a broom handle or something like that and shove it up. Now you've got the frog in a clear plastic bag. You can take it off like so, and you can now examine it to determine if you have a Cuban tree frog or not. If it's a native, let it go. If it's a Cuban tree frog and you want to go the next step is to euthanize the animal. We try to do this humane, and we have found that the most humane way to handle this situation, there's 2 ways to do it. Number 1, you just close this and put it in the refrigerator for a couple of hours. It is a cold-blooded animal, so its core temperature will drop, and it's like putting anesthesia in a surgery patient. So it'll kind of numb its nervous system, and then you can put it in the freezer overnight, and the animal will be dead, and you can just discard this into the trash can the next day. For other folks who don't really want to put a live frog in their refrigerator, another way, again, wear gloves if you got the option to do that. You'll open up the bag, remove the frog, and then you can take any of the chemical like Oragel, any of the compounds that for numbing your jaw for toothache or something like that. If you rub that on the skin, they don't have scales like reptiles, so if you rub it on the skin of the belly of the animal, that will in a sense anesthetize it as well, put it to sleep, and then you can turn around and put it in the freezer, leave that overnight. night and the next day dispose of it. So that is the Cuban tree frog. That is our first for the NISAW this week, and we'll talk to you more about another one.